Afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime Series, where we add value to people's lives, happening every Wednesday and Thursday on ebizradio.com. You can catch the Lunchtime Series on all major podcast channels. And to help us grow this channel, guys, we need you to follow, like, and share today's conversation, because right back in our coaching segment, we have such an amazing woman who's done some amazing things. She's the managing director of African Brand Architects, and Shereen Hunter. Welcome back to the show. How are you doing?
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Kevin, and good afternoon to all your listeners. And it's absolutely a pleasure to be back.
Shereen, I mean, last time we spoke, just to summarize up quickly, we spoke about, how possible it is for a South African brand to work at an international level. And I took all of that information to heart, and I was like, okay, cool. So how do I apply myself as a South African brand? And I did. And, I've landed one of my first international clients because of it. So, guys, if you want to go and check it out, go to the Lunchtime Series, type in Shereen Hunter, and you'll find the conversation we had. But Shereen, I mean, tell us more about you. Just sort of so the listeners sort of remember who we're talking to, and what we're actually going to be speaking about today.
So, I mean, obviously, I am the owner of African Brand Architects, and I'm passionate about building brands, Kevin. It's those moments of illumination where you put like-minded people into a room and you share ideas. And I love taking things from concept to execution because therein lies the gap. There's a massive abyss between the wonderful ideas that people have from a small startup business right up to top international brands, to actually being able to bridge the gap to what it looks like in terms of implementing it and materializing. And I think we sit in the middle of that. So I love building brands. I'm very, very passionate about African brands. I love chatting to people who want to invest in Africa and develop their footprint in Africa. And it's 25 years later, and I love getting out of bed in the morning, and I love what I do every single day.
And that speaks to, having the success that you've had, because I think, you need that passion, and you need to want to love what you're going to do. And really, I mean, exactly to why I get out of bed, because I get to see, people like you and have these conversations. I get to design and come up with solutions for companies, and to sort of help solve problems. I'm absolutely passionate about, helping people shift. But I mean, in today's conversation, there's an interesting topic that we're going to be covering, which I absolutely love, that from a brand strategizing kind of perspective, you're also tackling it, because I think it's a very necessary conversation that brands don't have. So tell us about that.
So today we're going to talk about what I call an expansion mindset. And it seems a little bit kind of on the edge. If you think that we've just come out of a global crisis, the last thing people generally want to talk about is expansion. But as you say, it's a conversation that's necessary. And I think we need to have that conversation sooner rather than later. Because with a lot of brands, what is still required is a rapid turnaround strategy. A lot of businesses are still hemorrhaging. A lot of people who are working from home are really struggling after a global crisis. And I think to some degree it is the environment that we are trading in, but I think there's also a level of mental entrapment in that we are now the product of the aftermath of that global crisis. And almost all the conversations that I've had, in the last 12 months have all been around how do we cut the fat, off the bone? How do we trim down? How do we consolidate? Where else can we save? And just a couple of weeks ago, I was watching a documentary. I'm forever learning, and that's part of my mandate to everybody in terms of just being successful, is this continued cycle of learning. But the coach that was speaking was a financial coach, and she was giving some advice to a young lady who needed financial advice. And what she said was so profound to me. It's all I needed to watch in the program. I switched off the computer after that, and I was like, that's what it is. And what she said to this girl is, you know what, you need to spend less time thinking about how much you can save, because there's a limit as to how much you can save and how shrewd you can be with money, or how prudent you can be, or how savvy you can be. What you need to do now is pivot and focus on how much money you can make, because there's no limit in terms of how much money you can make. And I thought, isn't that just the truth? Because as I engage with company after company, business owner after business owner, almost automatically it steers to how can we scale down? How can we be more conservative? And actually, the conversation that we need to have now is not so much about how much we can save and not get stuck in that place where you're so consumed with, being conservative about how you're spending your money, but really start to shift on, okay, how do we look at opportunities to generate more wealth and create more profits? And I think that decision is something you need to do consciously. I don't think it happens automatically. So for me, that was quite astounding. It actually changed the way that I've been approaching my own company in the last few weeks. Because I realized even myself, you just get so caught up in the cutting, and actually you need to pivot, not just necessarily to another industry, but to another way of thinking with regards to money.
This conversation is as if you've been reading my mind. I mean, I just received this information this morning, right? So we haven't prepped for this conversation. And in the last, I did a previous recording today on this conversation where we talked about moving from desperation into deserving. And it comes back to your very point here of mindset. And I think it's so important for brands to kind of look at that and kind of go, it is about where's my mind? Because part and parcel of that entrapment where, we've just come from COVID is now, this recession that's coming, right? So immediately it's panic stations for many brands, for many leaders. And immediately that's not useful not for your employees, not for you. So it's really like catching yourself and kind of going, okay, cool. This is a mindset thing. And where is my mind at, right? And I think that's what people really need to be to really be careful of. But I mean, why do you think people fall into that contraction mindset when they do, especially needing to make business decisions?
Well, I think there's two parts to it. The one I've already leaned into, which is, I think, we've had 24 months of programming, which is about being safe, protecting yourself, very much in a survival mode for almost all companies around the world, or a few specific industries. So I think that definitely is the kind of like the first nail in the wall. I think the second thing, which is we know it, but we're not always conscious of it, is the company that we keep, Kevin. I think we have to very intentionally and very deliberately change the conversation. And if we can't change the conversation in the community that we are in, we need to shift communities so that we put ourselves in the midst of the right kinds of conversations. And I think especially if you're a small business owner or even just this is not really relevant to small business owners because a lot of my work is with CEOs and MDs of huge multinational companies, but the company you keep, the conversations that you're having in the passage while you're having lunch, who you're having a brown with while you're watching the rugby on a Saturday, if that conversation is negative all the way, I'm a Christian, the Bible says bad company corrupts good seed. So the principle is that negativity will always pull down positivity and not that positivity will pull up the negativity. So I think the majority of your time, you must very consciously choose the company that you keep. And it is difficult because as we get older, we all fall into the rut of, having the same conversations with the same friends and socializing with the same people. And, if you do have a stable business, even the same clients, but I think you have to be very sensitive about what it is that you're listening to, and you have to filter that information. And if you can't get out of it, at least minimize or reduce it, because it has such a massive impact on you on a daily basis in terms of your psyche and your preparedness for the day and your view of the future, the company that you keep. So that would definitely be, the two parts of it.
It's like that old saying. Well, I don't know how old it is, but I mean, when I first learned that your net worth is directly equal to your net work. So who you spend time with will show you how much money you will earn. And when you sort of realize what that saying is, you will be influenced by the company you keep. And if you're keeping company that, like you say, is is not conducive to growth, and is not conducive to expansion, you're probably going to find yourself doing more of that than the opposite of that, right? Your net worth is equal to your network, right? So, and essentially the company that you keep will definitely permeate into what those conversations are, what it is you're talking about, what great ideas there are coming out, or not so great ideas coming out of people, and also how negative people are. It's misery loves company, so when you're keeping yourself occupied with that kind of environment, it's there's no doubt that it's going to pull you, especially if you're running a brand, especially if you're a decision maker, into a space that you want to try and avoid.
Absolutely. What I want to say is, I think post a global crisis, we are all very porous. Everybody's looking for some level of certainty, and everybody's looking for the right answer, when really there is no right answer. At this stage of the game, it is going to hinge entirely on your mindset and your ability to identify the opportunities and your level of commitment and discipline. You can't really look to anybody else in any other kind of context or environment to give you the answers that you're looking for. So from my point of view, I would say as a leader, you almost find yourself in a place where you have to guard yourself and ring fence yourself. And spending time with successful people is not enough, because you may spend time, Kevin, with very successful people that are going through real personal dramas and who are extremely negative. So the fact that they've survived with their business, or even that the business could be thriving, is not really a barometer for the quality of conversation you have with them. Just now, a week or two ago, I sat with somebody who used to be a mentor to me for many, many years. Sat, had a coffee, popped in, had a chat, but the conversation was so negative, and yet this business has exploded. It's extremely profitable. He's had dynamic growth. It's a wonderful business, but the conversation was just so negative from a political point of view, from just a general outlook point of view, just negative, negative, negative. And I walked out of that meeting feeling drained. And then the next day, woke up and realized, what it was? Actually, that energy was permeating it. Exactly your words. It went right through me. And I need to limit my time in that conversation. I think I have to be very sensitive. It is such a fragile period now. It's a real make and break. And the quality of those conversations are, extremely important.
So, I mean, that's a really great example. But what are the practical examples that demonstrate an expansive mindset? Because, we know that it's how you spend your time, but what sort of stems from a brand perspective and from a CEO or a leadership perspective of what is an expansion mindset?
Well, I think part of it is where you spend your time. So depending on how you've pivoted your organization. So if you were maybe at office space and you've moved your staff home, I think there's a space for that. I don't think you can leave them there entirely, and I think you have to look for opportunities to get back around the table and to collaborate, so that those big thinking ideas can really manifest, because they're not going to manifest with anybody sitting alone at home and purely working on Zoom. So one of the things I'd like to say is, if you want to really get your creative juices flowing, and add an element of risk to what it is that you're doing as a business, look at your workspace and make sure that it's inspirational. If you're in existing office space and maybe you haven't moved, just rework your space. Bring something fresh and new into that environment. Then I think definitely relook your network, your community, and see whose community you can possibly gravitate towards that is doing bigger, better things than what you are, or how you can bring people like that into your community at work to inspire the whole as a family. In terms of mentorship, I think it's important. This is a great time to cross-pollinate with mentors across different industries. Don't get stuck in tunnel vision where you're purely working with people within your industry. So, for example, if you are in the coaching space, perhaps collaborate with somebody who comes out of finance space or somebody who comes out of medical space, because there's some wonderful common denominators and ideas that you can take out of different sectors and bring it into your sector, and sometimes in a very cost-effective way. They've kind of invented the wheel in that industry. And then don't be afraid to appoint service providers or new employees. it can really choke a business when you are understaffed, because more often than not the opportunities are there, but you don't, in a contracting environment where you've contracted your resources, you just don't have enough people to get the job done in excellence on time, and then you end up losing a lot of the opportunities. So another example is I was sitting with somebody else coaching just recently, and they were really, really struggling in their business, and actually it had everything to do with automating that business. There was an investment required for a digitizing certain processes and really reducing the workload, which is a small investment now because digital products are so competitive. And the second thing was just to get a PA, mornings only, even start with a mornings only person who's in your space that you can delegate to, and that can really pick up a lot of the load. Because I always say the most expensive person to make coffee and do filing in any business is the business owner. Business owners should really be on the front line, securing those strategic partnerships or contracts or whatever it is, and the administrative should be picked up by a line of succession. So that's something that I really I preach to all my clients, is don't try and do it as cost effectively as possible. Rather get some interns in, get some junior staff in, get them to pick up that load and free you up so that you can really go and scale your business.
Yeah, I mean, I look at having a virtual assistant. For me, it has saved my life and time for me to really focus on so many other things. And right now, I can't function without her. I'm like, I need this, and she's like, okay, cool. And then she says, yeah. So Lauren is she's going to listen to this because she's going to help me edit this video. But I can't. She knows where stuff is and stuff I don't have to worry about. She makes things happen that is just sort of helping me churn out a whole bunch of content and information that obviously we work through during the week, but I don't have to physically sit there and do it, right? I mean, it's such a no-brainer, and I love that.
And hear often, Kevin, is people saying to me, I can't afford an assistant. And I always say, you cannot afford not to have an assistant. Because if you generate X amount of money per month with an extra set of hands, technically that should scale. So really you cut off your nose to spite your own face when you don't have the help that you need when the demand is there in your business.
Yeah, and looking at where it's moved to for me in my business now with an international client, I now have a personal assistant, I have a designer, I have someone who writes comms, and communications for me. Like, I can't spend time doing that as well, and the strategy and putting content together and finding the solution. Like you don't, right? And for me, it is having an expansion mindset. It's just you as the leader really need to have you need to know who to trust. You need to find the right people, and really just know that. And I think it is a mindset thing, like, how do I do what I'm doing, even if it's a smaller business, but, do it efficiently so that, and like to your point where you don't maybe need someone there permanently, but hire someone virtually, hire someone that's, there for 2 or 3 hours in the morning. But at that, again, it comes back to mindset.
And I want to say, be patient with the process, because the next thing that people tell me, oh, but I tried that and it doesn't work. And it's true. You may try 1 or 2 people and it may not work, but you have to be persistent in your business. You need to be patient until you find the right person. And then once they land, well, then the rest is history, because suddenly you can scale.
Exactly. So why do you think people avoid this expansion mindset? Because I know it's avoidance tactics are wonderful, and we create them as wonderful strategies to procrastinate and to excuse anything, right? But why do you think people are avoiding this expansion mindset?
Purely because it's uncomfortable, Kevin. It is uncomfortable to grow. That's why they call it the proverbial growing pains, isn't it?
Yes.
And from a psychology point of view, you will know that you only really start to change when you reach a level of dissatisfaction. Nobody really changes anything that is substantial when they're happy, when the system is working. So we have to really get dissatisfied and more dissatisfied and extremely dissatisfied. And when we are the most dissatisfied that it becomes unbearable, that is when we make the changes. People don't like to change. Everybody wants to stay the same. People prefer the comfort zone. And I think especially following a global crisis, I hate the word COVID, I'm tired of the word COVID now, but following such a massive global crisis, I think everybody's just wanting the stability, the anchor. Let's just settle down, like no major changes, let's keep it calm. And yet, there has never been a better time for the front runners, the leaders now, to go and take those markets and to bring those new products in. And those that are game, that have got the spirit and are prepared to take a couple of calculated risks, I think it's harvest time, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
And those that are going to hold back and sit and wait for a year or 2 or 3 to settle down at the rate in which things are developing and the competitors are popping up and international players are coming into the South African market, it's going to be too late. Unfortunately, this is one of those, it's like a marathon, whether you want to or not, you just have to push in for that last leg of the race. Yes, it's been unstable. Yes, it's been uncomfortable. It's the last thing we want is to be able to now scale and talk about expansion. We're barely recovering from, contraction, but actually the time is now.
I love that. I mean, so in terms of, speaking about brands, do you have a case study or example of a brand that is doing well, that's, really expanding their mindset in the economic climate that we are in at the moment?
I mean, in South Africa, I think a great brand to look at is Airlink. If you've looked at Airlink in the last, I want to say 12 months, you would have seen they've rebranded their aircraft, they've repurposed their content, they've positioned their brand completely differently, and they've been able to pick up a huge portion of the market. They were traditionally very much corporate traveler focused and a wonderful footprint into Africa. But if you look at Airlink as a brand now, you can just see a very dynamic, very fast-growing brand. The other day I was at the airport, it was as visual as anything. As I was walking towards a ticket counter to check in, the Airlink queue was just about as far back as the eye could see, and all the other check-in counters were standing almost empty. So you ask yourself as a brand person, what is Airlink doing right? And I think they were very fast acting in terms of the lockdown. I think very well run airline. But I think the way they've repositioned themselves and scaled, new aircraft, new routes, new, in the face of a global crisis, when so many other stakeholders in the tourism industry were really taking huge strain, they were expanding. And I think that's a fantastic example.
So, I mean, on the flip side of that, what kind of brand example do you have of that has failed with like having a contraction mindset?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's hard to point out one brand because we've seen a lot of brands deep dive and be lost in the market. But I think if I could just use an example of an industry where you either won or you lost, if we look at the restaurant industry and how those restaurants pivoted during crisis, there were restaurants that were closed down completely, so that would be that contraction mindset, reduce the risk, retrench the staff, get rid of the stock, sell half of the furniture in the restaurant, really, took a lot of strain, and we saw a lot of casualties in that space. And then we saw other restaurants, and I think of a place now, I just can't remember the name, but it was in Kempton Park, where they were, overnight became a drive-in, where you could literally, and they were in a shopping center, in a car park. It was not that they had the designated parking, and you could literally come and park outside the restaurant. They put a board through your car, and they served you the most ornate foods, milkshakes, beautiful gourmet meals, but served in your car. And it was a reason for people to leave their house. They could stay in their car, they could feel safe, they could order exactly what was in the menu into their car. And they just had a few more waiters running up and down, and kudos to them. We saw restaurants like that exploding and doubling in size. We saw photos of what that restaurant looked like just a few weeks ago. Friends of mine were there, and they've expanded that restaurant. They've taken up more floor space. So they took that opportunity, and it is a mindset opportunity where everybody, all their competitors were closing up shop and contracting. They took the opportunity to expand. So I think that's just a really good example of that.
I absolutely love that. I love that you use that example because it just speaks to that exact thing that we've been speaking about. Even though times are as difficult as they are, if you take a step back and say, okay, we know that there's load shedding, we know that there's crime, we know that the government is what it is, we know there's 110 things that we know, right? And it's like, okay, what am I doing about it, and how am I going to tackle this, and how do I show up so that I can rise above all of it and kind of go, okay, so how do I stand out amongst the crowd? And I think that's a requirement these days, right? If you're running a business, if you are a decision maker, part of that conversation has to be, how do I stand out head above shoulders above everyone else, and what am I doing that's different, right? Because I think that's a big differentiator. And I mean, it's amazing that some brands have actually done that and switched around, even the restaurant industry. But I mean,
sorry, I want another example. There's another restaurant that's up near Southgate in the deep far south of Johannesburg, but they also had a restaurant with a kitchen fully equipped and served to table. And during the lockdown, all they did is they built a whole lot of braais outside the restaurant, and they had open fires and a lot of meat, and it's a beer and a braai. And you can go there, whether it's lockdown, not lockdown, and you can always, get a beer, and they always braaiing meat, and they give you your meat with your salad, and when you pull up, also in the shopping centre, Kevin, these are not fancy restaurants. You can smell the meat, you can hear the music playing. It makes you want to socialize. And I tell you, there's not a time that I don't drive across that restaurant that it is not full from morning till night. So again, just a simple thing, by taking the food out of the kitchen into open air, created a completely different atmosphere, and there they are thriving. I mean, they could easily franchise.
Amazing, yeah. So I mean, how do we migrate from your perspective as from our brands and working in brands? How do we migrate from contraction mindset to expansion mindset?
So I think the first step must be consciousness. You must actually realize that your mind is focusing on the wrong things. So you need a high level of consciousness to be able to say to yourself, look, I'm negative. I'm thinking about the wrong things. I'm talking about the wrong things. I'm in the wrong conversation. I need to change. So that awareness of self is the first step. The second thing is you need to make a decision and stick with it. So if you've identified all the things that are not right in terms of your mindset, everything going in is wrong, you then need to do the flip side of that and say, okay, I'm in the wrong conversation. This is how I remedy it. My thought life is like this. I need to read more books, listen to more podcasts, whatever it is. So each one, it's like a manual. I always say, take your car out of automatic and you're now going into manual. First, second, third, fourth. It needs a very deliberate strategy. So that decision making. And then finally, you just have to push yourself. It is uncomfortable. Nobody wants to do it. Even those of us who are doing it well don't want to do it. It's hard. It's not easy. It requires discipline. It requires commitment. And there's absolutely no sidestepping that.
I love that. Shereen, I'm like, we already have hit our 40 minutes of comment. I love having these conversations with you, and you know what, I love it. Even from a brand strategy, I think your approach to why brand expansion, just this topic that we're speaking about today, relates back to humans and how humans show up and human behavior, because essentially when you break it down to building blocks, that's what a brand is. It's the people in the brand that make the brand, right? And the fact that you've connected those two for us today and really getting people to think, brands should be expanding. They should be, if you can sum it up for us and just give it to us in your last sentiments of the day. And then guys, we got all the links in the description boxes, and you can click and find Shereen wherever you are. And but if you could summarize all that for us today, what would that be?
I'd say one thing: fill up with the good stuff. It's a time for healing, restoration. Fill up with the good stuff. Do it very, very deliberately and intentionally. Whatever it is to restore and refuel yourself, do that. Keep learning. Keep, moving into the right conversations. Keep protecting your peace. Do that.
I love that. Perfect. Yeah, perfect. Managing Director, African Brands Architect, Shereen Hunter, thank you so much for spending some time with us. And I'm going to chat to you soon. I know you're going to be back. So have a wonderful week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.